Well, thank y'all for being here this morning. On Wednesday nights, we've been going over the life of Christ. And so in Dale's absence this morning, since he is in Colorado at Bear Valley, I guess it's a reunion or something. I don't know if there's a lectureship with it as well. But since he's out there, I've taken over class today and the lesson this morning. And so we're just going to continue our Wednesday night Life of Christ class over to this morning. I guess on Wednesday, not even last week. On Wednesday, we found ourselves in John, finishing up a little bit in John. We went through chapters 8, 9, and 10. And the last thing and for context, for those that have not been here on Wednesday night, or maybe you're visiting or something like that, Jesus is in his final 6 months of his life. The story we're going to talk about this morning is probably around the 5-month mark, maybe 5 months and just a couple weeks. But we are less than 6 months out from him being put on the cross, and then everything else that takes place thereafter. But Jesus has been having a discourse with the religious leaders. There's some disciples and the apostles there as well. But Jesus has, in the last couple of chapters of John, we had the story of the woman caught in adultery. It was kind of the one that kicked it off a little bit. We talked a little bit about what Jesus wrote in the sand. We have the light of the world, which is something that Jesus says. They are very confused when Jesus starts talking about the Father. The Jews don't quite understand what he is talking about or who he is referring to. They even make the statement at one point that they know who God is. And Jesus responds with, "You don't know God, because if you know God, you would also know me." And so they're very set off about this. They've tried to say that he is a Samaritan as kind of a rebuke against him. They said he's demon-possessed up to this point. And then, as you can see in John 8, starting in verse 31, Jesus tells them that the truth will set you free. And every time we kind of go over this, I always like to reference it, but they really missed the mark on this one, the Jews do. They even come back with a comment that they've never been enslaved, which anyone that has opened up the Bible or probably read history knows that that would not be true. But Jesus says that the truth will set them free if they know the truth. There in verse 32 of John 8. And then he goes on, because they're still missing the mark, and he actually tells them who the Father is, but he also tells them that they belong to the Father, the devil, starting in verse 39 of John 8, and tells them that they belong to the father of lies, and everything with Satan is a lie, and he is the father of lies. So let us remember that as well. And at this point, they've still not gotten overly upset, I guess you could say. They are upset, but they've not tried to stone him just yet, although they did just a couple weeks prior to this. But they do decide that they want to stone him after, or whatever he says, starting in verse 48 of John 8. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And they really get confused, because they're like, well, how? You've not been here, but 30 years, and this, that, and the other. And they're missing the mark again, that Jesus was there from the beginning. And you can see that from John 1, right there at the beginning of the Gospel of John. But he says in verse 52 of John 8, he says, "If anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death." And this all goes into the fact that the Jews are really trying to lynch their salvation to Abraham and being part of Abraham's seed. And Jesus tells them Abraham was waiting for this moment. Abraham was looking for this moment. Abraham was promised that this was going to take place. And you all claim to be part of Abraham. You all claim to belong to Abraham, yet you're missing the promise that was promised to Abraham. And so Jesus says in verse 58 of John 8, he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." And this is where they finally get extremely upset. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, which is a key part, because he's doing this in the temple as is custom for Jesus. And then last week, or this past Wednesday, I keep saying last week. I guess it is last week, because today is the first day of the week. I guess we can get that right. In John 9, Jesus heals a man that is born blind, and there's questions about why is he born blind? Was it because of his sins, his parents' sin? Was it passed down? We discussed that we are not born with original sin. There is some that do believe and do teach that. We can see from different scriptures, including this one, that is not the case. And Jesus says in verse 5 something very key. He says, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And then he goes on to heal the man by spitting in the ground and wiping the mud on his face that he's made with his saliva and the dirt. and the man is healed after he goes to the pool, which is key. He was not healed once Jesus put the mud on his eyes. He was healed once he went to the pool to be washed. So if he never went to the pool to be washed and didn't obey that commandment from Jesus, well, he never would have had his sight. But he did do exactly as Jesus had said. And as we continue this, I guess, brief wrap-up or a brief kind of look back before we get to our main study this morning, the people of the town actually took the man that was born blind. They took him before the religious leaders because he was healed on the Sabbath, something that Jesus has, they have tried to go after Jesus numerous times for healing someone on the Sabbath. And so they bring him before, the man gives a testimony, they bring the family. The parents want no portion of it. They want no part of it. They push it off. Oh, he is of age, let him answer. And we know that they are afraid to be kicked out of the synagogue, is essentially why they're not really wanting to answer. And that's something that we touched on again on Wednesday. There is people in this time, there's people in the early church, and there's even people today, maybe not as much in America, but in parts of the world, when they decide to accept Christ, they very well could lose their entire family. They could lose a large friend group. They could lose a whole bunch of things. And that is something that this man could even risk the chance of. Even his parents are not willing to give a testimony for him. They're like, oh, let him answer. Right? We don't want to be kicked out. We don't want to lose whatever position we have, whatever it could be. Look at Saul. Saul is very high ranking. And then when he is on the Damascus Road and he's blinded, and we know that story, he goes and talks to Ananias and so on and so forth. And then he starts following after Christ. All the positions he had in the Jewish rank, they're gone. All those people, they're going to start turning on him. Why is he doing this now, right? And things like that. And then we know how Paul starts to teach and things of that nature. What is so interesting is that the blind man really gives great responses back to the Pharisees and the religious leaders. He even asked them if they want to become disciples as well, which is an interesting comment, but they basically say that Jesus is possessed by a demon, and he says, well, no man possessed by a demon could heal something like this, could heal me from this point. And so that leads us up to where we are this morning, finding ourselves in Luke 10, in the next portion. And again, this is just slightly after what has just taken place with the discourse that he's had with the religious leaders. But Jesus is about to send out the 70 or 72, depending on your translations. We're not going to get too much into that this morning. But Jesus is about to send out the 72. And there's a lot that we're going to look at. And this evening, we're going to look at the second portion of this, which is the parable of the Good Samaritan, coming up right there in the middle of Luke 10, starting in verse 25. But this morning, we're going to focus on the first half of Luke 10. And so it says, starting this, Luke 10, verse 1. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them out ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. Now, I want us to notice something about this. Jesus is sending out people. Who else has he sent out today? All of us, right? Have we been commanded to go? Yeah, we can find several verses about that. We've been commanded to go. Now, notice what else he's done. I think this is interesting because this can bring us into fellowship as well. So he sent them out ahead of him, right, because he was also going to be going to different places, and we're going to discuss that here more in a little bit. But how did he send them? 2 by 2. Into the ark they went, 2 by 2. In the beginning, he made woman because why? Who said? I heard someone say it. Helper, right? Man needed a companion, right? And so 2 by 2, you can see 2 by 2, not to be alone. We're going to talk about that a little bit in our Sunday morning lesson here after this, but companionship, going together. You don't have to do it by yourself. That's what's so beautiful about the family of God. Whether you're visiting from another state, another country, wherever you may be, whether we go from here to somewhere else, it doesn't matter where you are, you're still part of the family of God. And so being together, being one, is something that you can see all throughout the text. But they go 2 by 2 into every town and place. Now, can you imagine if we did that today? Do you think we could use that today in America? A lot of the times when we think about missionary trips, we think about sending money to someone in a different country. We think about sending someone to a different country. What if we just went 2 by 2 to Pigeon Forge, or 2 by 2 to Sevierville, or 2 by 2 to, I don't know, some town in Ohio, I don't know, 2 by 2 to wherever town you're from? What if we did that? What if our congregation broke 2 by 2 and we went to different places? Some people today they'll still go to the old door knocking campaign, and I'm not, there's different methods you can take. The good news is wherever you go, you can always share the message of Christ, which is what we're going to talk about a lot this morning. And so in verse 2 it says, and he said to them, so now he's telling them what he expects, what's going to take place, what the, further context. He says, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Does that still apply today? I'm big on trying to flip our mindset. And it's easy to get stuck in a rut of having the wrong mindset. And it's easy to get into that rut and not be able to notice that you're in a rut of having the wrong mindset. A lot of people today, coming out of COVID and everything else, are like, man, church attendance, it's down. Less people come. Some people have stopped going. True. Now, can we flip numbers or statistics? You can make statistics say whatever you want. That's the crazy thing about these analytical people. You can literally make up about any stat you want based off what the numbers say. You just change them around. Well, how do we change that around? There's less people in church. What does that mean out there in the world? There's more people that need to hear about Jesus. So now the higher probability is the more people you run into, it's a higher probability they need to hear about Jesus. There's more people out there that now need to know about Jesus. That means there's more conversations that we can have, more people we can talk to, more people we can tell about Jesus. There's also going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit of people that know they need to come back. And that's our job to encourage them as well. So it says the harvest is plentiful. Boy, is it plentiful today. The laborers are few. Are the laborers few? Percentage-wise, absolutely. And again, we're going to talk about that here this morning during our lesson as well. Therefore, it says this, therefore pray earnestly. Circle, highlight, underline. Don't just pray earnestly that we can have more laborers, but pray earnestly about everything. Pray without ceasing. Sometimes we can get in the habit of making decisions without even praying, without even consulting God. We just make a decision because that's what we want to do. And then once we make the decision, then we go to prayer, and we're like, Lord, can you make sure this happens? Right? It needs to be vice versa. We need to be consulting the Creator. So it says, therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Go your way. Behold, I am sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. It applies then, it applies today. Do we feel like lambs in the midst of wolves? Is the world out to devour us like wolves would devour a lamb? Absolutely. Do you not see that today? Does the world not try to silence Christians? This is something that Brian mentions all the time. Does the world not try to silence Christians? Absolutely. Did the world try to silence Jesus? Absolutely. Barabbas. Crucify. Well, why? Because he was preaching truth. Why? Because he was shining light onto the world. They've tried to say that Jesus is possessed by a demon just moments before this. Why? Because he was teaching, he was saying something they didn't agree with. So he says, behold, I am sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Carry no money bag, no knapsacks, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. Give me a look, Glenn.
I just don't get that.
You don't get it?
Don't greet anybody on the road.
Is there any? Wait, I'm not gonna. Don't raise your hand. There's someone in here. There's multiple people in here, probably. Y'all ever watched a squirrel try to cross a road? You didn't think you'd hear that this morning, did you? Boy, they get like a quarter of the way, sometimes 99.9% of the way, and they're like, I think I saw something back over there. And they run back in front of your car, and you're like, slamming on the brakes or, whatever it may be. Why does he tell them to greet no one? I think he wants them to stay focused on the task at hand. I'm sending you to this location. Make sure you get there. Do you see people today that seem like they can never get to where they're trying to go because they just have to stop and do this? They fill their schedule with like 1,000 different things, and they can never get there. They're like shiny object. I have to talk here, and yet you never accomplish what you're trying to do. You get so caught up in doing everything else, you never accomplish what you're actually sent to do. Can we do that today? Well, I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to visit this person. And then eventually I'll tell them about Jesus. And then it's like, you've been over to dinner for like 30 times, and you've still not cracked open a Bible. You're still just like, I'm going to keep talking to them. Eventually it'll happen. You're sent for the mission, right? And so sometimes we can get distracted by a whole bunch of things. And what I love so much about this is in verse 4, he says, carry no money bag. You don't need it. Why? What did Abraham say? I always go back to this point. I love it. The Lord will provide. He'll provide. right? So you don't need to be taking all this money with you to try to provide it for yourself. I've got it covered. Just have faith in this. I've got you covered. Take no knapsack, right? So take no bag. You don't need to pack no luggage bag for this. Now, some of us would struggle with that one today. Hey, I'm sending you out here, right? Now, this ain't no fun vacation, I guess you could say, right? We ain't going to the beach. It's going to be fun because we're going to save souls. But you don't need to take no bag. I've got you. Just what you got is fine. I don't need all these extra things. I just need you. And I just need you to have faith in me, and everything's going to be fine. No sandals. We're going to get to the sandal portion here in a second because you're going to hear some of what they're going to say. And greet no one on the road, which is something that Glenn just brought up, something we just kind of briefly talked about. This is something that was said also in the Old Testament as well, but again, I think it goes back to sometimes we can get so distracted from the task at hand. We can get so distracted by the world and everything the world throws at us, and we think we have to go chase here, chase here, chase here, and we turn into that squirrel on the road, and we're 99.9% across the road, and then we're like, but wait. And then we basically go all the way back to where we were sent from, and we never even got to the finish line. Right? And there's going to be people in the world today that are going to get to 99.9% of their way to obtaining heaven. And at the last moment, they could revert back and lose all of it. It's tragic. That's awful, right? And so keep our eyes focused. And I don't think he's telling them to not greet anyone in a rude manner. I think it's just this is the task. And you look at this, did Jesus instantly bring the good news to the Gentiles? There was a waiting period. We talked about that on Wednesday as well because he says there's some of a different fold. He's talking about us. Praise be to God that we're part of that fold now. But he wants them to stay focused. He wants us to stay focused. We have a lot of distractions around us. Cell phones, TV, sports going on right now. Sports are always going on, but all these different things are going on. They're always trying to distract us. The time clock, the schedule at work, this, it is. You know, so there's X, Y, Z, all these different things. Stay on task. So he says in verse 5, whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. But if not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking what they provide. For the laborer deserves his wages. Do not go from house to house. Whenever you enter a town and they receive you, eat what is set before you. Heal the sick in it, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you. But whenever you enter a town and they do not receive you, go into its streets and say, even the dust of your town that clings to our feet, we wipe off against you. Nevertheless, know this, that the kingdom of God has come near. I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than for that town. Now, as you look at this, you have two different scenarios. One, you're going to be accepted. The other, you're not. What is so common, I feel like, in the world today is we focus on the latter part of that, when you're not accepted. And what we don't do is what it says right here in verse 11. Even the dust of your town that clings to our feet, we wipe off against you. Wipe it off. Did people leave Jesus? Several months ago in his life, people walked away. Teaching was too hard. We gotta eat your flesh and we gotta drink your blood? This guy's crazy. They left. The apostles thought the teaching, some of his teachings were tough. Divorce and remarriage is one of that's strict teaching. Don't be consumed with the people who reject it. We're going to talk about that here in a moment too, because he's going to tell us more about this. Be consumed with the people that will say yes, that will follow Christ. Consume your time with that. We don't have time to consume our short life already. It may seem long. It's short, really short in the grand scheme of things. It's just it's not even a speed bump on the road. It's short. Don't consume your life, short life, with things that are negative in this world. Consume it with things that are positive. Life is way too short to be consumed with people that always want to be negative and drag everything down. Let us be a light, right? Not drag people down, but I won't say drag people up, but lift people up. And notice what's so important is here. It says, the kingdom of God has come near to you. What did John say when he came out of the wilderness? Anybody? Going way back? What did he come proclaiming? The kingdom of God is near, right? The kingdom is coming. The kingdom is about to be established. What's the kingdom? Now, some people get this wrong now. What's the kingdom? The church. Some people, and the Jews here, they're looking for what? Physical. It's going to be something physical. People today are looking for something physical. They think the war over there in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas and all them, that's something to do with the book of Revelation and these different prophecies and this, that, and the other. God's in control, right? Because when you start going down that logic, you'd have to think that Jesus failed when he was on earth because he couldn't establish his kingdom like was promised. That's a whole other topic we can get into, but the kingdom is the church. Let us not lose that. And Jesus even mentioned that. My kingdom is not of what? This world. So, the kingdom has come near to you. It's come really near because it's about to be established here shortly. Also, key on this in verse 11, wipe it off. Dust off your shoulders, dust the sand off your feet, the dust off your feet, and keep working at the task at hand. Keep working at the task at hand. Now, in verse 12, I think this is interesting, and we're going to get more into this starting in verse 13 through 16. But it says, I tell you, it will be more bearable on that day for Sodom than for that town. Now, what happened to Sodom? Oh, they got just wiped out. And you can go back and read that story. Boy, the things they were trying to do to some spiritual beings was not the grandest, was it? And boy, did they get just annihilated for it. And here he's saying it's going to be more bearable for them. Why? We're going to see it right here in verse 13. It says, Woe to you, Bathsheba, for it is the mighty works done in you, works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon. They would have repented long ago. So if these works were done there, what would have happened? They would have repented. Sitting in sackcloth and ashes, but it will be more bearable in the judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you, and you, Capernaum. Now, what happened in Capernaum? We talked about this maybe about 2 months ago. You all remember what happened in Capernaum? You could list off about almost any miracle or teaching. Jesus did a lot right there. And this is what he's getting onto him for. He says, And you, Capernaum, will be exalted to heaven. You shall be brought down to Hades. He taught and taught and taught. There was miracles performed, all these things. And then what? Still didn't believe. Still didn't listen. His own hometown. Nothing. They had seen all these things. They had heard all these things. Nothing. Do we see that in the world today? You've heard teaching after teaching after teaching. The invitation has been extended and extended and extended. And for some reason, you still just don't act. They had Jesus right there before them. They had miracles performed, teachings done right before them from the Son of God. Nothing. It's sad. Verse 16, the one who hears you, hears me. The one who rejects you, rejects me. And the one who rejects me, rejects him who sent me. Now, what does this tell us about if someone rejects us whenever we go to teach them about the gospel? Are they rejecting us? Does it say that? This is the part that we get stuck on, right? We start thinking, well, people are rejecting me. I don't want anybody to reject me. Awesome, because they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what? The Word of God, right? It just keeps going up that, Mark.
Just an idea here. When he talks about the cities, there have been governments and cities that fully reject, but there are people in there who will believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is mainly on the powers of the world that exist in governments that will fully reject and fight against the Word of God. I think this is a really strong message to them. And Jesus always, when he's really, really serious, he deals in hyperbole.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing about, don't read it in a way, it's hyperbole, but meant to be, this is how serious I am about spreading the kingdom.
Yeah, and when you look about at some of these cities, we've seen it numerous times, even in the past month of the life of Christ. He'll be teaching, and there's going to be division. We actually talked about it on Wednesday night. There was division among the people, and many, what? Believed. People are still believing. And that's a beautiful point, because in the world today, we can feel like no one is believing. No one's wanting to listen to truth. No one wants to hear it. Jesus in some of these towns, people, they're trying to stone him. Yet what? People are still listening. People are still believing. People are still willing to follow because they can see how great the teaching is. No, that's a good point. Boy, I'm not used to teaching on Sunday morning Bible. This clock up here is just confusing me to pieces. Go ahead, brother.
Isn't that why they say
10:15.
principalities in high places even now?
Say it one more time.
The principalities in high places is what he was talking about.
Yes, and there's going to be, who's at work in the world today? The devil. And who's the father of lies? Who does Jesus say that the religious leaders are belonging to? Their father, the devil, right? And so we've got to remember that people today are still going to be underneath that. That doesn't mean everyone is. Some people today have basically just hook, line, sinker believed all those lies, which is tragic. And that's something that even in these cities today, there's been so much truth put before them, but they are sticking their heels in the ground. They're digging their heels in the ground, and they're just not going to come off the lie that they've been told for whatever reason. And they're just going to die on that hill. And they're not even going to die physically, they're going to die spiritually because they failed to see the truth. And you see that in the world today. People will dig their heels in on something that's not true because they've always been taught it, and then when the truth is brought to them, they just dig their heels in. And you can see it in all kinds of things today. There's a pride issue in the world today. There's a pride issue in the world here. Why were the religious leaders struggling to accept it? Pride, position, money, power, all those different things, right? Why do some people fail to accept truth today? Pride, you've got to admit you were wrong, right? That's hard, isn't it? Is anyone just like lining up and, let me be the first one in line to admit all the things I've been wrong at, right? I don't think anyone's jumping in that line at the old fair. Right? Everyone's like, let me stay as far away from that right as possible. I'd rather not admit my faults, right? And so it's hard. It's hard for all of us, and it's hard for them here. It's also important to note that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, while they're not getting it, neither are the disciples and the apostles fully at this point either. Not even Jesus' own family is fully believing at this point. And so a lot of people are missing the full context. They're not going to get the full context until you get into Acts 1, Acts 2. And so people are still missing the point. They're not still understanding everything. Okay, I went on that tangent. I don't even know where I was trying to go with that. But anyways, that was a good little tangent we went on. Back to verse 16. Back to verse 16. The one who hears you hears me. What does that mean we need to be speaking? So if someone hears us and they're supposed to be hearing Christ, what should we be speaking? Truth. You should be speaking what? What's been set before us, right? Because if they're going to hear him, what do they have to hear? His message. So it's not our own message, it's his message. And the one who rejects you rejects me, right? So we're not the one being rejected. They're rejecting him. And the one who rejects me rejects him who sent me. Now, this is key for the Jews during this time because they're saying, oh, no, we know God. Yet they're rejecting the Son. So do they really know God? Right? They can know who God is, and they cannot know him. Before this, they were talking about with the man who was born blind. He says, well, he can see, and you all can't. Can they see? Oh, they can physically see, but they can't spiritually see. Today, we can know who Jesus is and not know who Jesus is, if that makes sense. You can know who Jesus is. You can know that he was some person that apparently died on the cross, and you can have no clue who Jesus actually is and what he did for you. And that's what they're missing the mark here.
Jacob, it'd be interesting to know a little bit more about what people were thinking in the region. You got 36 teams going out performing miracles all over the region at the same time.
Yeah.
What would have been going through their mind, and what were they thinking was happening during that period?
Yeah, it would be interesting. And as they return, what a great segue. We're going to have to let you just start standing up doing segues. As we go to verse 17, And it says the 72 returned, right? So they've been sent off in these different teams. As Michael just mentioned, the 72 returned with what? With joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. And nothing shall hurt you. Key verse right here in verse 20. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but what? But rejoice that your names are written in heaven. So they come back with joy. So you've got to think they've had some success. And they're excited because even the demons are subject because of his name. Not because of something they're doing, but because of his name. Same for us today, right? People don't obey the gospel because we're just some great teacher. Now, we could be a good teacher, but it's not us. It's the power of the word that saves. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Can you imagine? Satan had it all. Had it all. And threw every bit of it away. People in the world today can have it all, and they can throw it all right away. Satan was in such a marvelous and wonderful place. Wasn't good enough. You see it in the world today? Boy, people got it real good. Just ain't quite good enough. Need a little bit more.
Jacob, all 72 returned. Right? They were all faithful. Every one of them came back.
Yeah, that's another beautiful part too. What did he say earlier? He said, and no one shall, I'm going to get the exact wording right. He says, and no one shall hurt you. I'm missing the verse here. But he basically tells them, I'm going to protect you. You don't need to take money. You don't need to take, you don't need to pack a bag, sandals, none of that. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you. And as Michael just mentioned, who comes back? All of them. We talked about the sheep following the shepherd earlier on Wednesday. So we need to be listening to his voice. We need to return to his voice. What I love so much about verse 20 is it's easy. Wouldn't it be easy if you had power over the demons and you had power to heal people and this, that, and the other? Wouldn't it be easy to rejoice in that marvelous fact? He says, don't rejoice in this. That's not even the main portion of this. That's not even the best part. The best part is what? That your names are where? Written in heaven. You could have everything on earth. Boy, you could have everything you could ever imagine. But that's not what life is about. What's life about? Having your name written in heaven. That's why you should be rejoicing. That's why Christians should rejoice today. It's not about something that we have here physically. It's about having salvation. It's about having a home in heaven. That's what should cause us to rejoice. So why do we let so many people steal our joy, steal our happiness? They ain't stealing heaven from us. It's been promised. It's been guaranteed to us. The only way they're going to steal it from us is if we just give it over to them. In verse 21, this is kind of where we'll close up in the last 5 or so minutes we have left. In the same hour, he rejoiced in the Holy Spirit and said, I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. Who does Jesus give thanks to? The Father. Jesus knows. Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for such was your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father, or who the Father is except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Then turning to his disciples, he said privately, Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. When you look at this, Jesus starts off by giving thanks. Then he says that you have hidden these things from the wise and understanding and revealed them to the little children. Now, how is it hidden to the wise? What hid it from the wise? What did Pharaoh in Exodus struggle with? Did God harden his heart? Who hardened Pharaoh's heart in all reality? Pharaoh did. He heard the word. The word came from God. But how was he hardened his heart? He was failing to reject it. Well, every time you hear the word of God, there's only two options that take place. You harden it or it softens. One of them's taking place, right? Pharaoh hears the word. Sometimes it's like he's like, I think I'm going to get there, and then he just kind of backs back off, right, and hardens his heart. Some people today think they have so much understanding and so much grasp, and they think they know everything. They're just missing the truth. The people here, the man that was born blind could see better than the people that could physically see. Does that make any sense, common sense-wise? None whatsoever. But he could see better than the people that could see. Why? He was listening to the right voice. And little children here again is mentioned, something that we've talked about numerous times. Then he says in verse 22, all things have been handed over to me by my Father. All things. Now, if you go back to our Wednesday night class again this past week, Jesus says that he basically goes on, this is paraphrasing, he voluntarily laid down his life. No one forced him. No one made him. Did it by himself. He decided to do it. He turned himself over. The world thinks they killed him. Did they? He allowed it. And they didn't really kill him at all, did they? You can kill the physical body. They can kill our physical body, but you can't kill the soul. Soul gets to live on, right? And so that's what we're working towards. So it says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father. Now here people are struggling to know the Son. They're missing him right in front of them. They're not. If you go back and you look at John, which we did a recap at the beginning, they're missing who the Father is. They're not even understanding when Jesus is talking who he's talking about the Father is. You know, they're thinking about he's talking about some earthly father and this, that, and the other. They're missing the point of who the Father is and who the actual Son is. And he says, or who the Father is except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Who is the Son chosen to reveal him? He wants what? Everyone to come to what? Knowledge of the truth. Predestination's a hot topic in the world. You know who's predestined for heaven? Every single one of us. Some people don't like to listen to their GPS. Y'all ever get lost trying to go on vacation? You stop listening for a little bit. I don't know, maybe your phone dies. I don't know what. You get in a good conversation. You don't listen to GPS. You take a left. You get to the split on the interstate and you go left instead of going right, and all of a sudden you end up in, I don't even know what, some other state over here, and you're like, man, I was trying to go to the beach in Florida, and I'm like in Maine, you know. I'm way off track. Now, if you get that far, got more than not listening to your GPS with you. I don't know. You lost track of time too, but the point is that all of us are predestined for that. The sacrifice has been made for everybody. Today, during this time, in past time. The sacrifice was made for all. It was set up before the foundation of the world. For everyone. I've said this numerous times. Hell was not made for us. It was made for who? Satan and his angels, who Jesus says he saw shot down from heaven like lightning. Well, if it wasn't made for us, what was made for us? Heaven. That's where our GPS needs to be going towards. We need to be listening to our GPS. I'm trying to think of a quick phrase I could use for GPS, so like God-powered, I don't know, salvation. I don't know what you want to come with GPS. That's pretty good on the spot, wasn't it? We need to listen to our GPS. Our GPS is leading us to heaven. But when we veer off of that, even though we're predestined to reach it, I can be predestined to go reach Tampa, Florida. But if I veer off and don't take the right exit when I need to be going through Atlanta, guess what? I ain't going to end up in Tampa, Florida. The same thing today. If we veer from the truth, we don't end up at our predestined location.
You have arrived at your destination.
Yeah, a couple miles away. I'll finish on this because we only have like a minute left. But in verse 23 and 24, it says, turning to the disciples, he said privately. I don't think the disciples even truly understand what all they're witnessing and how many people would love to see that moment. You ever watched a moment in history? I don't know if everyone ever has. You've watched a moment in history that goes down in textbooks. These people are literally in that moment, and they hadn't even fully realized it yet. Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you that many prophets, you think Abraham and all them, you think all the people in the Old Testament like to see this moment right here? They were told about this, they prophesied about this, all these different things, right? And kings desired to see what you see and did not see it. And to hear what you hear and did not hear it. They have so much right there before them. And they're getting to see it all before their eyes. It is a beautiful and it's a thing that wouldn't it be awesome to be, I say this, I don't know, it'd be very, they went through a lot of stressful times. Wouldn't it be marvelous to sit there and be one of the disciples to get to follow around Jesus? Man, the things you would see. And there's a lot of persecution that comes, but the things you would see, the teachings you would hear, boy, they had a front row seat to something so marvelous. And because they had that front row seat, because he came down and because he died for us, we now have a story that we can share with everybody so that we can have a front row seat with Jesus as well. Thank you all for being so kind this morning. And scoot on up as we get ready for our sermon or lesson or worship in 15 minutes. Thank you.